All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of You Know What It Is. You know what it is. It's Form Check Friday. It's the show where you send your videos to me and I put them up on the screen behind me and I say, hey, I think you could adjust your technique a little bit here, huh? And we try to make you better lifters. I don't know. So yeah, that's what it is. Real quick before we get started, just want to mention that the Calgary Barbell training app is going to be going on sale next Friday for Black Friday. So if you've been thinking about trying the app, you've been thinking about getting all those sick features and the coaching advice from myself and all the coaches and the form checks and the programs and all that sweet, sweet stuff, I'm going to recommend you hold off until next Friday. We're going to put it on sale, and I think that's going to be great for everybody. Now, without any further ado, we're going to dive into this. So we're going to start off with Ryan. Now, Ryan's deadlift was what we left off with last week. And let's just take a quick look. So he says he can't seem to maintain his leg press feel on heavier weights, and his form breaks down around 495. So for me, looking at this lift, it honestly looks pretty damn good. Like, I don't really think you're losing much in terms of the leg drive of the lift. I think you do a pretty good job pulling yourself in. Yes, we see a slight bit of the hips rising, and maybe that's what you're referring to, is that little bit of shifting the hips up behind you is making you feel like you're almost like stiff legging it, right? Like your hips are way up behind you. And to some extent, yeah, we lose a little bit of that position. So I would say the biggest piece of advice I would give you would be to try to like really keep those knees wedged forward and just try to be more patient off the floor. I think the biggest thing that happens with people when they lose that position in order to get that bar moving is they don't realize just how much pressure you need to put into it at the beginning to maintain a really good position. So at this point, you basically, we don't really want this torso position to change. We don't want this hip height to change. And what happens is, yeah, there's a decently big shift of that. I think we also lose some low back position. But I think more than anything, if we can keep those knees wedged forward, because you'll notice, obviously, we pull in. One of the things that happens as the hips come up is the knees go back, right? So keeping the knees forward, keeping some pressure on the forefoot, a lot like we'd cue somebody if they were doing like a squat morning. You know what I mean? Where everything's kind of kicking back onto the posterior chain a little bit, where we're kind of like losing the quads, if you want to use that kind of language. But yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice for that. So hopefully you can wedge yourself in there and stay a little bit better. All right, now this next video comes from Barassi. Hopefully I'm saying your name right. This is his squat. He says he's 42 and he's from Nauru. And he said, you probably haven't heard about my country. Barassi, Nauru, as best as I know, and I looked this up before we started filming here, but Nauru has like a population of 10,000 or 11,000 people. And I think as a nation, they've broken, 3, 4, 5 or more IPF open world record or open squat records. So I have absolutely heard of Nauru before. It's the home of Jesu Wepa. It's baby weight, man. So yeah, definitely know of Nauru. You guys are more well known than you think. But anyways, so here's a squat from competition, and I think it looks pretty damn impeccable. So when Dylan was picking these out, he looked at your squat and said, we can look at the squat, but his squat's good. So he included your deadlift because you sent your deadlift as well. So we're going to take a look at your deadlift and see if I don't have some advice to offer you on your pulls. All right. So with the deadlift here, I think a similar thing to Ryan, like we're starting to lose the knees back. We're starting to see the hips come up a little bit. So I think really focusing on wedging yourself forward with your knees and then focusing on maintaining a lot of lat tightness so that you can stay in position off the floor. Once the bar comes off the floor, things are looking pretty good, but we also overdo the hips coming through, right? Like you can see here, we might get called for this for soft knees. So make sure that as you get to lockout, you're continuing to drive with your quads. You're continuing to try to like push your knees straight all the way up, and think about locking out up as opposed to locking out back. That's a cue that I like to use quite a bit. So I'm not sure if there's maybe another rep here. So second rep, you actually do a way better job of holding position, right? There's way less shift in the knee and hip position. So that's good. I think still from about here, you're just trying to pull back. Keep pushing. Keep the push going because we want to continue to use the quads. We want to continue to use those knee extensors to really push the floor away to get a good locked upright position. Second rep, I think you even did a little bit better on the knee position. So it looks like we just need to learn to apply the same amount of pressure and force and bracing that we do on reps 2 and 3 to the first rep. And I think that's a pretty common problem. And I think it stems from really not getting tight enough on the first rep and then sort of realizing what it takes to perform the lift and being like, oh, I can do that. I can actually do that. And then just putting a little bit more in for reps 2 and 3. So to start off with, I want you to try to put more force into your first lift of the sets. All right. Up next, we got Tony. So Tony's benching 255 here. He says he struggles with keeping his butt on the bench, and he struggles with the unrack because he says he unracks and his elbows bend a little bit. So he wants to get better at unracking with straight elbows. So let's take a look here. Oh, interesting. It's like a Smith machine with horizontal movement. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that before. I think that's just like a self-spotting bench. I would guess that it's probably not assisting too much. Like a Smith machine, you're kind of not lifting as much weight as you think you're lifting because of the way it works. But this is interesting because it allows for that, like I said, that horizontal movement. So very, very interesting. Okay, so to start off with, it looks like you're pretty tall and this bench is really short. So if your butt's coming up off the bench, let's see here. I don't think your butt actually comes all the way up, but I do think you kind of like don't put any leg drive into the lift until here, 20 seconds in, right? So at this point, when you unrack, we're just limp and loose in the lower body. We need to be applying leg drive. We need to be using leg drive to contribute to the setup and to stabilize your body and to do all those wonderful things that leg drive does. We need to start that from the time we unrack, maybe even before the unrack, right? So right here, before we unrack, start the leg drive. That's probably gonna help you unrack too. Also, when you're unracking like that, and you're kind of like screwing out like this, you're losing shoulder position. I want you to keep the shoulder blades back and down, pop it up, and then pull it out this way, right? As opposed to going like this out of the rack, right? Think about one good cue to get the elbows straight is think about like splitting the bar apart, bending the bar this way. That might help. In terms of the press itself, we're pretty loose on the way down. The touch is really loose, and then you press it straight up instead of back. And that might have something to do with what we're doing here. I mean, if you have the option to just go use like a normal free weight bench, I'm going to recommend you do that, especially if you're looking to train for powerlifting, maybe compete someday. Yeah, your touch is loose. I would work on trying to be a little bit more controlled in the bottom. You definitely kind of accelerate a lot in the bottom third or quarter of the range of motion. And I think that because of that, you get loose down here and then the bar comes up before it starts going back. And you'll notice that the strength curve, the velocity of the bar throughout the movement matches that, right? Back, right? So it speeds up as it gets back over your shoulders. So there's a number of things there, and hopefully that helps you. That was Tony. D'Angelo is up next, and D'Angelo is a hell of a deadlifter. So he says this is his first time ever pulling sumo. He's pulling 606 for 2, so 275 kilos for a double. He says his best is 725 conventional. He wants to use sumo as an accessory because deadlifting conventional twice a week is messing up, and he wants to do 2 times a week deadlifts. And he feels like he's doing something wrong. So I think the big thing here, D'Angelo, is just pulling the slack out of the bar, right? You're kind of just sitting down, and then see how this is where you pull all the slack out of the bar right here. you just like initiate the lift, you pull back to pull the slack out. And I think that if we could pull the slack out starting here, tighten the upper back, pull the tension from the upper back down into the hips, then start pushing the floor away. As you do that, actively resisting yourself, pull the hips down to wedge yourself into tension, right? It's all in that sort of mystical pulling the slack out of the bar, but you're really not pulling the slack out until the very end. I also think you can take maybe a slightly wider grip because it looks like the shoulders are a little rolled forward. I think with a bit of a wider grip, you'd be able to get a tighter upper back position, and you'd be able to kind of like open the chest through a little bit more and probably have a little bit more success off the floor. At lockout, both off the floor and at lockout. The other thing I'd do is I would probably clean up these lockouts. It looks like you stopped short a little bit on the last one, and then you threw the bar down without keeping your hands on the bar. So, habits that I would recommend trying to get away from and train out of yourself. But overall, like, you're super strong. I think even just practicing this a bit, you're going to get infinitely more comfortable. If it's your first time doing it, like, it's going to feel like you're doing something wrong, even if your mistakes are maybe pretty minimal here. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing I would try to work on is trying to figure out how to pull the slack out of the bar a little bit better, right? So at this point, tighten the upper back and the lats, pull tension down into your hips. And then as you sit your butt down, actively start pushing the floor away. It's going to help take the slack out of the bar. And it's really you're going to pull yourself into a position instead of sitting into a position, if that makes sense. So, yeah, man, other than that, it's looking real good, man, real good. Okay, now we have Tariq. So Tariq started squatting in 2017. He says he has a tendency to squat too deep for powerlifting. He says he's got a very squat morning pattern. Sometimes comes up on his heels a little bit. This is 415 for 6. So I can see what you're talking about, Tariq. I think the biggest thing here is, yeah, we squat too deep, and because we squat too deep, we lose position, and when we lose position, we lose tightness, and then we come out of the hole funky because we've lost tightness. So it's a string of events. So if you can better tighten and better brace and better maintain tension through this bottom position, it's probably going to solve all your problems, because it looks like you're really, honestly, even with that big loss of tightness, you're able to really recover quite well. I think maybe a heeled shoe, maybe a heeled shoe. I wouldn't say that's a catch-all. Excuse me. Got you, though. You probably yawned with me. I wouldn't say that's a catch-all or like a super necessary thing, but if we're finding that we're getting like really bound up feeling in the bottom, and the only solution to get the rest of that depth is to like really hit the bottom and loosen up, then I would say that's when you want to incorporate a heeled shoe, be able to maintain more tension and kind of resist that bottom position a little bit better, which I think is the biggest issue here, right? If we play this through, you can see we hit the bottom and then we lose bracing in the upper back, which you can tell from the elbows coming up behind yourself there. And then as we come out of the bottom, in order to regain tension, we shift back into, the squat morning pattern. So a little bit more control, a little bit more consistency with how we dip into the bottom. I think the other thing is when we talk about bracing, I think we're trying to brace really extended. And I think as we come out of the hole, you tend to be in a more neutral position. So I actually like this torso position a fair bit more than how you're starting the lift. So I think you can pull the ribs down more when you brace, pull the lats down more, and try to create a little bit more of a sort of like neutral ranged looking brace as opposed to being so extended. I think it's going to help you feel tighter. I think it's going to help you maintain tension better into the bottom. So yeah, the other things I would work on are maybe some pin squats or some pause squats or tempo squats, where we're having to spend time in that bottom position, because that bottom position is really where things are falling apart for you. So those would be my biggest recommendations, Tariq. Hopefully that helps. All right, up next is Paul. Real quick before we do that, I'm sure some of you have noticed the drip, the Apparel, if you will. Yeah, this is all we're going to show you for now. I happen to be wearing it today, and hopefully it'll come out like early December. December 1st is like what we're hoping for. We don't know yet because it depends on shipping times and some stuff like that. It's kind of up in the air a little bit, but we do have a good amount of the apparel, and we will be putting it up for sale around December 1st. All right. Now we're going to get back into some bench from Paul. So Paul's been lifting 8 years. He said he has never had anybody critique his technique. This is his third set of 6 at 215. And he really didn't say much more. I'm not sure if he has plans to power lift or not, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this up to our wonderful community out there on YouTube. So I want y'all to go down into the comments section below. I want you to leave any critique or constructive criticism or piece of advice that you've got for my boy Paul here. And I will tackle Paul's bench press first thing next week. So make sure you tune in for that. And that's it for our episode today. So thanks to everybody for coming out, for hanging out. Make sure you check out the app next Friday when it goes on sale. And keep your eyes peeled for the apparel. We might post a little something sooner rather than later. All right. Bye, everybody.